Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dean Pollock. I'm the Senior Coordinator of Events over here at Sport for Life, working under Kabir as well as Talia Moore, who's here as well. Just a quick little introduction. I'm going to be introducing Kabir Hossein, who is the Director of Operations and Strategic Initiatives at Sport for Life, who is also hailing from the beautiful country of Trinidad and Tobago. As you can see his proud flag right behind him.
See my flag.
Yeah, and Kabir was actually a leader of the Athletics Association Olympic movement in Trinidad before we got him over here for Sport for Life over in beautiful Victoria. I'm currently based out in Hamilton, Ontario, and I'll let Kabir introduce himself now.
Beautiful. Thank you very much, Dean. Thank you very much, everyone. Before I go any further, I really want to give thanks and acknowledge these lands on Turtle Island. We at the Sport for Life Society, we really honor all of the nations across this beautiful land. I'm joining you in this virtual space today from the Lekwungen territory of which the Esquimalt, Songhees nations do reside. I give thanks on behalf of my family and I, on behalf of my colleagues, and on behalf of each and every one of you. I would like for us to be comfortable. Feel free to unmute if you have questions. Feel free to drop them in the chat box. My colleague Dean and I will be monitoring the chat box. As my co-panelists make certain points, we will be dropping links in the chat box, so do monitor those. It will take you to further resources for your continuous learning journey. But it is key that we respect each other. We respect each other's opinion. I do ask if someone is speaking that you keep yourself on mute, and we respect each and everyone's opinion in this virtual space. So I am Kabir Hossein. My pronouns are he, him, il. I really do enjoy quality sport and physical activity because it has changed my life. I am new to this country, coming from the beautiful Twin Island nation of Trinidad and Tobago. I am a father of 4, and I'm excited to share some stories, learn from my panelists, and also assist you with the questions that you may have for us today. So without further ado, I really want to stop talking right now and hear from the beautiful panelists. We have Kirathika Rathanswamy. So we have Noel and we have Craig. So Kirathika, let's hear from you. Where you're joining us today, and tell us a bit about the BC Volleyball Newcomer Program.
For sure. Thank you, Kabir. Good morning, good afternoon, maybe good evening for some people. My name is Krithika, K for short, and I'm speaking today from the traditional, ancestral, and unceded lands of the Coast Salish, Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam nations, also known as Vancouver. It's a beautiful day today, so I'm very excited and happy. I currently work with Volleyball BC, and for the past almost over 2.5 years, we've been running a number of newcomer programs within the province. So I'll just tell you a little bit about kind of how we got here and the background. So in 2021, Volleyball BC, we launched our new strategic plan. And one of our key goals under this plan was to expand our reach. So making sure that resources and programs were in place to create exclusive and welcoming environments for everyone. And we've been that's kind of where the journey started. We, touched base with Kabir's for different organizations just to see kind of the work they've been doing around DEI, because this was like our first initiation into this area. So we worked with an external consultant in corporate inclusion to look to do like kind of like an audit of the organization, where we have gaps, what's happening, and where we want to see to kind of create our DEI vision. At the same time, we received some funding from Sport BC to pilot a number of newcomer programs. So for the first year, in 2021, we piloted 3 programs here in BC, in Vancouver, Richmond, and in Penticton. So after doing a community scan of the province of BC, seeing where newcomers reside in the province, where those populations are, I started doing a little bit of research and reaching out to various organizations and groups, primarily newcomer and immigrant settlement organizations that directly worked with newcomers. So our approach was going to the organizations that are currently already working with newcomer programs and how collaborate or partner with these organizations. So I found in this process, a lot of organizations had sport and physical activity as one of their key goals or initiatives, or actually in their strategic plan for that organization. So, for example, our first partnership which was with South Vancouver Neighborhood House, they were already running a physical activity and sport after school program, and they were actually looking for coaches to run various sports. So when I approached them, it basically worked already in a pre-existing program. We didn't have to, book a facility, find a time. The participants were already comfortable. They knew where, the grass field was. They'd already been going there. There had been a number of unstructured programs that had already been running. So our approach so far, we've now completed 6 newcomer programs in BC, and some of these have been like continuous partnerships with these organizations, is really working with the partner organization, in this case, the immigrant or settlement organization, and catering to their needs and wants. So that has really been beneficial because, again, the participants are comfortable. There's already been a trust that's been established with the organization and these participants. They're already pre-existing program, either that be like English classes or other things that they offer within that organization, and as well as they've helped us with the recruiting, actually finding the participants. So we will work with them sometimes if we wanted to run like a children's program, but they have come back to us and said, we think that the youth would benefit because they're the most vulnerable group, and they've just recently come here, and versus the younger kids who've had other opportunities maybe in school. So our approach has really been collaborating and working with these partners and delivering our program. So it's not about the participants coming to us, but it's really us going to them, working with those organizations and delivering these programs. And obviously for us, it aligns with our strategic plan. It's in our key initiatives and in the activities that we have said that we're going to do and we prioritize. As well, just recently, we just launched our new DEI strategy. So everything kind of aligned and has come together. And it, again, one of the 2 pillars in the DEI strategy is to remove barriers and to build partnerships. So that's kind of just the gist. I'll let maybe Craig and Noel jump in and talk about the programs that they were running, and then we can talk further about a little bit more specifics. Thank you.
Yeah, great way to start us off. Powerful first leg in our relay, Kurthika. Thank you. I think you mentioned creating those courageous partnerships, going to the newcomer serving and supporting agencies and co-creating. And like that, when it comes to quality sport, contributing to the 3 Ps: good people, good places, and good programs. So let's hear from Noel and the team at the Center for Newcomers in Calgary around the Real Me program, which is sort of a holistic program of which quality sport program is just one component. So we'd love to hear from you, Noel.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you very much for the introduction. Hello, everybody. My name is Noel Bahalabi. I am the Director of Youth Programs at the Center for Newcomers here in Treaty 7 land in Southern Alberta in Calgary. So right now, our primary kind of endeavor into sports is through our Real Me program. So our Real Me program is an identity-based wraparound intervention. So it's newcomer youth, first and second generation, so kids that came to Canada and kids that were born here that are the children of newcomers. And are considered high risk or criminally involved. High risk in sense of gang involvement, criminal involvement, or just falling out of school or at work, whatever keeps them in a state of vulnerability. So wraparound is a social work term. It's really based on the idea that you put a youth at the center of your service and you build a team of support around them, really building on that idea that a village raises a child, and really that ideas of community building. So we'll operate monthly team meetings with whoever we find in their circle. So this can be people from their school, people from their religious circles, from maybe an ex-family member, coach, and really trying to get everybody on the same page to set monthly goals to help that youth address whatever their immediate needs are and start building a more positive outcomes for themselves. So we offer 6 main services in this program. So it could be tutoring for school, a counselor, employment services, uh, getting the life skills, family support, really working with the parents if they're struggling to adjust to Canada and may not be in the best position to really give their youth extra attention, especially if that's youth, if they're having any mental health concerns or learning disabilities. We do a mentorship program similar to Big Brothers Big Sisters, and the big piece that's in the context of this presentation is pro-social support, really focusing on how can we get this youth involved in recreational activities, introduce them to positive role models through coaches, but then also introduce them to positive peers, other youth that may have a better influence on them, a positive outcome for them. And then of course, there's all the positive health outcomes that can come from it. A lot of the youth, I'd say about 82% of the kids that we work with in our 2022 study found that had moderate to severe levels of past trauma, which could obviously contributes to a variety of health conditions, whether that's developing and presenting it as ADHD or learning disability later on in life, whether that's high blood pressure, whether that's anxiety disorder. And sport can really play a key part of helping them manage those feelings. A lot of the youth we work with have anger management challenges, especially the youth that are involved in the justice system. So sport can also be that outlet for them to expel that energy. And then the most important part is really creating those positive peer connections, helping them meet people, whether they're from their community or even from different communities. We can see, especially here in Calgary, we have quite a few enclaves where cultural communities will really concentrate in one neighborhood. And as much as that may insulate you from some peers, it can also hinder positive ideas getting into that community. And it's also a great opportunity just to introduce youth to activities that they typically wouldn't do. So whether that's winter sports, really outside of the big basketball, soccer sports, introduce them to different activities where they might meet someone they typically wouldn't have met, or they might find a new skill that they didn't see themselves having. And we really see how sports been playing a big part for us in that sense. And then we also run some other programs that are more focused on early intervention, obviously keeping kids from ever getting to that high risk status. And sport and arts has been playing a key role of how we've been building those relationships with schools, other local youth programs, and then especially in the juvie. Kids are just sitting up in there. They have a regimented schedule. Using sport is a great way for them to kind of move around, talk to other youth, learn how to work together, especially when you're in a place where you might not like everybody around you. And then also just kind of take down those walls, take down those barriers where they're willing to share a little bit what they're going through. And sport's been a great medium in that sense too. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you very much, Noel. And you made a really good point. It takes a community or a village to not only raise, but build a child, build a community. And we'd really love to hear a bit more about how engaging those youths in sport and physical activity breaks down those walls, and how we can sort of dismantle them. And speaking about community, we have Craig joining us all the way over in the Atlantic. And like, this is the beauty about virtual spaces. In this virtual space where we probably have about 120 folks joining in, I think we are operating in like over a dozen time zones. So let's hear from you, Craig. You mentioned that you're joining us from the beautiful island of Jamaica.
I'm not sure anyone in Canada right now wants to hear somebody saying that they're on this call from Jamaica, but good day, everyone. My name is Craig Brown. I guess I am actually in Jamaica at this point in time, but it's not for a joyous occasion. A family member on my wife's side has passed, so we're here to show support for the family. But the program that I'm representing, the Anti-Racism in Sport campaign that started in Winnipeg, seated on the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, the Cree, Ojibwe Cree, the Dakota, and Dene peoples, and it's the homeland of the Métis Nation. The water that we source from the Shoal Lake 40 First Nation, and that's something that we also like to just remind ourselves of, not just remind others of. But Just a little bit about our program. Well, it started in approximately 2020, 2021, and how it connects to newcomers. It was really born out of a discussion that took place in the newcomer sport community. So you had newcomers who were primarily parts of racialized or religious minority populations who indicated that they were facing quite a few things within the sports spaces here in Winnipeg. And a lot of that would be identified as racism. Now, for many persons, it was still an indication, or the perspective was prevalent that there's no racism in sport. For some persons, it was a case where they kept on reporting these things. They kept on saying something was happening, but nothing would be done in some cases. So in collaboration with a lot of sport community partners, representation from that advisory committee from the sport community in Winnipeg is actually on this call today, but in conjunction or advisory committee and in conjunction with the University of Manitoba, primarily their faculties of art and faculty of kinesiology and recreation management. We sort of launched this campaign through the funding provided by Canadian Heritage. And what the campaign is focused on since then to now, it's just trying to identify what's happening in the space for First Nations, Métis Nations, Inuit, racialized and religious minority populations. What have their experience been as it relates to racism within the sport context in Winnipeg? And then seeing how we can put supports in place to not only remove racism or eliminate it, which is really part of our mandate, but to help to empower those who are within the space, organizations, sport partners, or even individual stakeholders within sport in Winnipeg, to try and see what they can do to raise that education and awareness and create a safer space for everyone involved. So that started with, and I'll get into a little bit more of it later, that started with a research project that included an environment scan, looking at what's happening across Canada, what sport organizations are doing to combat racism in their spheres across Canada and in Manitoba and a narrower scope in Winnipeg, looking at what the literature says. And when we check, we recognize that when you look at the sports space in Winnipeg, not much been documented as empirical data as it relates to racism and how it's been perpetuated within the sports space. You might hear about incidents related to the Indigenous population, but there was a gap in terms of just trying to find out what was happening. So after conducting the research and finding out and hearing from our participants, hearing from those who observed it, seen it, heard about it, and to see what's been done, we sort of used that research to guide our going forward. And that resulted in us having a public awareness campaign, which included a video that's on YouTube that we shared quite widely to just persons who've experienced racism, sharing what they have gone through. We've actually had quite a bit of our information shared through city sports spaces and in public City of Winnipeg spaces, because the City of Winnipeg is a partner on our campaign. So they've also committed to actually sharing a lot of what we have found. We've shared infographics. We've gone into middle schools and had discussions and trainings with middle school students and with their teachers. We now conduct a stakeholder training where we actually train or help to educate sport partners, help to educate anyone who's interested on racism, on what's currently happening in Winnipeg and what they can do to not only be non-racist, but to take an active or play an active role in removing and reducing racism from sports spaces. And I think another thing that I'd want to touch on shortly is just that we also, along with that focus of, let's not just tell people about it. Let's not just tell people this is what you need to do. We've also launched an anti-racism in sport accord, where sport and community partners have signed on to that accord. And that's them indicating that they're committed to, in Winnipeg, in Manitoba, creating safer spaces that eliminate racism. And it's not just we signed an accord, we've moved on and nothing takes place. But it's that commitment to actually starting to take those steps to address barriers that exist within their sports spaces. And we also commit to walking with or sport partners or accord partners through this journey, providing them with resources like anti-racism policy templates or helping them collect disaggregated data. But we're here to help, to not just tell you what to do, we're here to walk through it with you. And that's just a quick snapshot of what our campaign has focused on and how we've looked at communicating or connecting it with newcomers, helping to ensure that newcomers to Canada, especially in Winnipeg and in Manitoba, when they interact with the sports spaces, those sports spaces are places that they can feel like themselves, they can feel welcome. They don't have to worry about racism being prevalent in that space.
How powerful is that? Thank you very, very much, Craig. And let's stay with you, Craig, to learn a bit more around the barriers. Our discussion today would be, okay, understanding barriers. And what we mean by barriers are impediments to, in particularly in this context, those who are new to this country, gaining access to quality sport, gaining access to physical activities, which, as we heard from Noel, it's a really powerful tool to create awareness, a sense of belonging, a connection to the community. So you touched on a few barriers where the concept or the perspective that racism in sport does not exist. So like, tell us a bit more from your experience and a research-based informed approach that IPW, Immigrant Partnership Winnipeg, and along with all of your wonderful colleagues. Tell us a bit more about, what are some of the barriers that the newcomers that you have supported in your work and will continue to work with you and your team? What are some of the barriers that you would have encountered?
Yeah, I'll gladly share. For newcomers or who were included in the research, part of what Dave shared, looking at that more overt racism. So just imagine somebody going into a sports space, somebody calling you names, somebody telling you to go back to the country where you've come from, somebody mispronouncing your name intentionally, somebody physically going at you. How about even your own coach telling you whatever you have here is better than what you would have had in your home country, so you shouldn't be complaining about it. What persons have shared are some of those overt things. So when you look at barriers, when you go into a sports space, you don't feel safe because either things are being said, done to, or done around you that make you feel comfortable, make you feel less than, point you out as the other, or just simply says, you are not welcome here. This is not the space for you. If you want to touch, and again, our other panelists beautifully shared some of them, and I'm eager to hear some of what they are going to share. When you look at the structure of the sports spaces, so in our research project, we not only just said, let's look at what's being said, some of the overt things, but what about some of the things that are structural that you don't see, some of the more systemic issues? So you will see, for example, sport being organized in a way that ignores barriers that many newcomers face, a lack of transportation or lack of funds or lack of availability for certain sport programs in certain parts of the city. So if you want to participate in this sport, in some cases, and you want to play in this league, you actually have to become a part of a team and to go to play your sport outside the city or on the other side of the city. And I know for sport organizers, there are a lot of things that they're working through. It's not easy, but there are many stories that persons have shared that have just simply said, these competitions, these leagues, they're being organized in ways that simply say, I don't care about whatever barrier you might face. You need to pay your fees, you need to get your equipment, and you need to make sure that you show up to participate, and that's it. So I've had coaches say, you know what, I've had to, and be careful with what I share in such a public space, I've had to disregard some of the instructions to ensure that my athlete or my participant can take part in sport. I have to go and pick up my athlete. I have to ensure that for my athlete to come and play today, I have to make sure I get food for them because they are foregoing the time slot that their family would be allotted a meal for where they are. We've had newcomers indicating that these are just some of the things that they have to go do simply to be a part of sport. I'm not talking about it has to be elite sport, but to simply be a part of sport. They have to overcome even the perspectives of their parents, depending on the country that they're coming from, and the perspective with sport based on gender, based on sex, based on role within the families. Have to factor a lot of these things in. Many newcomers have shared that with wanting to take part in sport, many of the systemic choices and the policies, the way things are done, make it hard for them. So unless you have newcomers serving organizations intentionally targeting them to ensure that they're involved in sport, you have many that would simply not be involved in it, or that would drop out of it, or some don't even know where to go to participate in their sport. But one final in terms of a barrier that they have shared, based on our interactions and stories that I've heard, you've had instances, and I'm not saying this is the norm, but you've had instances where certain sport organizations or groups have intentionally put policies in place to bar a certain team of newcomers or to prevent access to facilities or opportunities for newcomers. One participant that I vividly remember shared a story where they've used a particular venue before, and when they've gone back to the venue the year after a lot of back and forth, the administrators just simply said, you know what, like, I know that we don't want you to use a facility, and I know you don't pose any more of an issue in terms of the damage or use of the facility compared to other groups that are using it, but we just don't want to rent to you guys. So when about barriers, it's not just simply the things that you will see in front of you, the things that are done to you, some of the things and decisions that are being made, some of the way the system is structured have represented significant barriers for newcomers as it relates to wanting to be a part of sport, or the perception of how they're being treated based on their race or their ethnicity or their cultural background.
Super, super well said. Thank you for sharing. And like, I'm excited, in the next 15, 20 minutes when we go to discussing, okay, how could we dismantle some of those systemic barriers? And I would love to hear from Kritika in the volleyball space and engaging those who are new, not only to this country, but in some cases new to that greater Vancouver space, to that sport that you're doing an amazing job leading. Kritika, what are some of the barriers that you have encountered while supporting those who are new in your sport?
For sure, yeah. So thanks, Craig, yeah, for sharing that. That was some of the things you said were very powerful. So as probably most people know, like, financial barriers, or even as a newcomer, is a big concern for sport and where it's kind of heading. And when you take this specific population group, there's so many other things that their priority, making sure they have food, they have a house, they have clothing. So now you're bringing sport involved. And for us, I think one of maybe a benefit, or just within the sport, is volleyball, in terms of like cost, is a low bearing cost sport. We can play on the beach, indoor, or on the grass. So in terms of like equipment and what the participants would need, is very minimal compared to a lot of other sports, hockey and whatnot. And so all of our programs that we've offered have been free for the participant. Removing that barrier that they're coming to play, there is no cost, even if we're giving them, the equipment. We've supported in terms of providing them with equipment, volleyballs. So that has really benefited when the program has been free. We've been fortunate that we've gotten funding from a variety of different government and provincial organizations to support this. So obviously we are looking, like, what are those next steps, like, if we sustain these programs, and how we can continue offering these programs, and tying up with like kids sport and things like that. In terms of another barrier that we also found that we, when we were working with these different organizations, is really finding leaders and coaches that are from the demographics or spoke one of the languages that the newcomers came from. So when we were reaching out to our coaches and even had a coach call out, we do of course have a lot of coaches in our coaching database who run a number of programs, high level, but we're really looking for we were looking for coaches that these participants could relate to. So obviously in the last 10, 15, 20 years, we've had a huge influx of new immigrants that have come to BC. A lot of them might have been athletes and coaches in their native countries, and they haven't even been able to access the sport. So when we did a call out for coaches, we actually there was a lot of people that were interested. Some people just weren't available at the time the program was running, but they were very interested to participate in the sport that they grew up playing, but also give back here in BC. And for them, that was also like a connection, getting to know other people in their community, right? So I think it benefited for us that we always tried to find a coach or someone that spoke one of the languages or someone that the participants could relate to. I still remember, I think one of our first newcomers programs that we ran for Filipino and South Asian participants, the South Asian coach said, as much as she really enjoyed it and everything with the Filipino participants, they geared more towards a Filipino coach. So even though, she had no issues coaching them and it was a very positive experience, naturally they gravitated towards that coach, right? So there's something that was relatable that they could connect with. So that was something that we saw that we need to make sure that we found people, leaders, champions that they could relate to when they're in these programs. Transportation, as mentioned, is huge. When we're trying to remove that barrier, we are working with organizations, and where the program actually happens is close to the home of the participants. Either it's walking distance or they've been provided with bus tickets, so they're able to take the public transport and to and from. Right now, the new ones that we are currently I'm in process of that we're going to be doing, we are looking for a public, a private bus that will transport participants to and from, at least to the neighborhood, because a lot of the kids will come, there'll be 2 or 3 from each family, right? So it's really important for parents that they get home safely, they know where their child is and they're coming back. And that's a big concern. So again, building trust. If transport is a thing, then we are looking to see what we can do. Or is it that someone, goes with them on the public bus and then they get off at their spots and there's always a leader that's with them. So we have found that these, all the barriers that people have, clothing, one of the programs that we're starting next week, we've provided socks, tights, t-shirts. The agency has even provided everyone with running shoes, which is as simple as some of them don't have shoes. And it's been wonderful because as much as when the organizations that we've partnered with, they're as enthusiastic and they're financially also providing support to the programs. Either that mean, food, for example, we're going to be giving dinner every day after the program that we're running it, right? So it's just simple as that, because as Greg mentions, it's longer than their time. They would have probably missed dinner by the time they get home. So now we are providing that opportunity. So there's a social environment as well as a physical component within the program. So it again, barrier even just from our end is that we need to have support and funding to be able to do this and sustain these programs long term. We've had funding, but if funding it gets how as an organization, and if we're looking at it from more of a bigger picture with all sports, how can we continue offering these programs for free, low barrier, and just removing all the things that they're already facing. So when a person is coming into the programs, we don't want to add another barrier to them, right? All the things that they're already been facing on an everyday basis is the only way they're going to be able to come and get out and come and do this specific sport. And another thing I just want to touch upon just is that just recently I was at a school last week actually that we're starting a newcomer program for girls, and that gym has a weight room that oversees the gym. So right there, from a structural perspective, this program is for Afghan girls, and trust and the environment that they're participating is a big concern for parents. Like they're not going to allow their, daughters and girls, even though a lot of them go to that school. But the first thing, we're working with the partner, the school, there's a number of people that are at the table, and we're saying, okay, what are we going to do? Like we need to, if they're not comfortable, we have to be able to block, or like, there can't be no weight room classes happening at that time. So it's working with so many different people. It's not just us going and delivering the program at the school, but having all the various partners, we're all together being like, yeah, okay, if this happens, we need to do this. We need to talk to the school principal, the PE teacher. There's so many people that come together to be able to provide a safe space for these participants. So we've, every program for us has been different, and I think what we've really tried to do is go to the organization and work with them. These are the barriers that they've been facing. This is what's like in previous programs, or if they've already ran some physical activity in sport, and working with them to see how we can remove those barriers when we're offering our program to them. And that collaboration has been kind of for us, has been a positive, and why we've continued a lot of the partnerships with the organizations that we're currently working with.
Thank you, Kurithiko. Really great points around some of the barriers, such as clothing, transportation, the social and the physical component. But if you don't mind, I want to go back to a really, really key point. And in the chat box, I've been conversing with John, where you stress on the importance of creating a relationship based on trust. Could you tell us a bit more, like how would you and some of your facilitators create that relationship, create that trust, so that we can you can understand not only between Volleyball BC, the newcomer serving organizations, the parents, and Noel made the point about it takes a community. So I'd love to hear a bit more, like how did you and your team create that trust?
For sure, yeah. So I think when besides, like, of course, working with the partner and that, but really, like, all of our programs, we've ensured that if it's a parent or guardian that is involved, like all our material was, if we can get it translated, we invited them to info session to do them. All of our initial programs, the first day, parents are welcome. So they'll bring their children, they sit the entire time, they watch the program, they understand how the coaches or instructors are instructing, how they're communicating, what kind of environment their kid actually is in, because some people, it is a brand new program and they will stay the entire time. If there's any questions, concerns, and I think the trust has also it's benefited for us because a lot of the coaches and instructors are from the backgrounds that these children are from. So when you have someone that, maybe doesn't, English is, they were still developing their English skills, and then we have a coach that is able to talk to the parent or the participant, I think they feel comfortable and at home, and they're able to share things with like the coach if they need to explain something. And we noticed that especially in when we did our new program in Richmond, a lot of the parents would be talking to the coaches and just explaining things if they didn't understand something, and that actually like leave their child and go for the hour and a half and come back. So the whole role modeling and having those that are leading the programs come from the backgrounds, to get demographics as well, because that helps them understand, like, if there's a kid that's going through something, if they've come from a war-torn country, all the things that they would have similarly gone through if they had been a newcomer versus growing up here. So I think that has really helped for us, and as well as our partners have really worked with us and told us, in the specific demographic, this is what the concern is, and we need to address this. This is what we need to do. Like, if that is like transportation for this new program is very important. They will not let their girls. We ensure that safety is number one. How are they getting home? Where do they what are we going to do? This is, and it's going to be it is a cost, like that's a huge cost in terms of getting a private bus, but it is something that is very important that we ensure that they're getting home from the school to their homes, right? So I think those are things that we have to ensure to build the trust that we have with these participants. But I think because the organization has a really good, like, newcomers go to the settlement organization, right? That's probably the first place from a school they get connected to. So because they have that trust built, they trust their settlement worker or someone when they indicate, hey, there's an offering for this physical activity program. I think your child would be interested, or they might have seen someone express interest in the sport, and that's how they can get connected. So they've also been a very big support for us in terms of recruitment and building that trust within the group that we've been specifically working with.
Thank you. And on the flip side, safety in sport is the hot trending topic in at least the sectors that Sport for Life Society and most of the participants of this webinar are operating in. So on the converse side here, Karathika, when that trust is broken, it is so difficult to reestablish that trust. And you may, folks, you may find that I'm stressing on this point, but fostering those courageous relationships, particularly with the organizations, parents, the participants, and really understanding the cultural adaptations, such as representation. So in your recruitment of your facilitators, as Kirathika mentioned, the Filipino community, the Afghani community was key for their program's success, that they have facilitators and coaches from those cultural backgrounds. So really, thank you for sharing, Kirathika. And as we stay within building relationships of trust, I'd love to hear from Noel and the wraparound program of Real Me. When we talk about the barriers and how you would have supported overcoming those barriers, Noel, to the various youth, could you tell us a bit more?
Yeah, absolutely. Barriers to trust is a good topic as well. I think when it comes to barriers, I think Craig and Kate really summarized it well. It can be whether it's paying fees, whether it's transportation. I think it's a common theme across Canada that cities are super sprawled out. They're not really easy to get around, especially here in Calgary. It's definitely one of those West Coast cities that have that. It's a 5-minute drive, but a 2-hour bus ride, or because you got to go through all these suburbs and everything, and it doesn't make sense. Which you can imagine if you're new to Canada, your family's still getting your license. That's a big piece. It's like if I can't walk, if my community isn't walkable, then you're not going to explore outside of it. And then the piece about having coaches there that look like you, that make it more inviting. Um, is that sport been introduced to you before? You're kind of limited to what sports can be played, particularly in the global south. It's really what's the cheapest, what's the most accessible. So getting kids to see themselves, the extreme end, maybe hockey or cricket or lacrosse, those type of sports that are much more heavy in terms of financial need. Um, it's a bigger barrier for those youth. And then also it's really trying to convince parents that it's worth their time to engage their youth in it. I think a lot of parents, when they come to Canada, their view is you should be an academic. Like, you need to justify why we went through all of the trials and tribulations of coming here, and me paying $500 whatever for registration fee for something, that's not important. You should be focusing on school. And I think that's even a bigger barrier, is really trying to convince parents that this is worth the investment, this is worth their time. When in the context of our high risk program, part of that trust building and part of that breaking down those barriers is really working with parents to understand how drastically different parenting in Western countries is versus much of the global South. And when you come back to that idea of the village raises a child and community building, my family's from East Africa. In East Africa, as a parent, your responsibility is to feed, house, and clothe your child. But the general community will take a collective role in kind of building your youth up. When you send your kid to school, the school is responsible for your attendance, for your performance, for your discipline, for everything. The parents don't take an active role of that. If you get caught shoplifting, the shop owner will discipline you and then contact your family, because you probably live in a pretty small community. Maybe your auntie or uncle is on the same road. Maybe your grandmother is in the house. There's many bodies taking an active role in your life. Whereas in Canada, if you're living in a major city, you kind of, yeah, somebody, if you're hungry or if you need a housing or you need clothing, somebody will offer you something. There's some outlet there, but in terms of really genuinely uplifting your child, educating them, building up that mental piece, there's a lot more expected on the parents. And when you add in the fact that our youth that we work with are high risk, so a lot of them are coming from refugee camps, a lot of them are coming from war situations or situations where it wasn't safe. Those parents already have a limited level of parenting knowledge. Maybe they are young parents, maybe they left home at a young age, and then that limited knowledge of parenting isn't even applicable in Canada because now you can't really trust where your kids are going outside. I can say for a fact in East Africa, there's no one on the corner selling drugs. It just doesn't exist. It's out completely outlawed. So they're teaching parents that you need to be aware that, you know, if you're not focusing on your kids and paying attention to where they're going to after school, who are their friends with, where they're hanging out, somebody's going to come find them and say, hey, I see you're struggling to learn English. I see you're struggling to fit in. You should hang out with us. We'll protect you. That kid made fun of your accent. We'll beat him up for you. You're part of us. You're part of our family now. Oh, you don't have lunch money? Let me take you to McDonald's. Let me buy you. I see your shoes are old. Let me buy you shoes. Do me a favor. Hold this backpack for me. Drop this off at this house, this address for me. It's that simple where these kids just come in. There's not a great settlement system base here, especially when it comes to schools. Kids are kind of just thrown into a school. Schools aren't made to have heavy numbers of newcomers. And particularly when it comes in the context of Calgary, you get those enclaves where it's predominantly one community that has all these newcomer families moving in. The school has funding to maybe do 15 kids, 20 kids a year for English learners, but now there's 30 kids coming in every year. They're not even in a position to really support those kids. And we see in our gang program, when we get a kid a tutor, their attendance goes up, their engagement goes up. So if you're not really paying attention in class, you can't follow along. You're not going to want to be there. And then that's just another way that you're vulnerable, that another way that that kid, that negative peer pressure comes in and he's able to convince you to get involved in something like that. So it's really building that with the youth as much as it's exposure. I would say our biggest thing is really working with the parents to get them to understand, like, I understand you moved here, you're trying to work. Maybe you didn't have work experience coming or your credentials weren't recognized. You're working odd hours, you're working in the evening, you're working on the weekends. You need to put that extra effort in, build that community. If you love that community back home, you need to build it here. It's not here waiting for you. And really working with the parents to find who in their communities out there, if it's the school, if it's the through a faith group, through a community association, get them involved, like get your kids in arts, get them in sports, because it's not just the all the danger that's out there that you're trying to distract them from, but that's the way you're going to build them up. That's how you're going to introduce mentors into their life and positive role models into their life and get some better outcomes for them. And it's a fact of life. In Calgary, I can take you to the juvie. 60-70% of the kids in the juvie are Black kids. Another chunk are Arab kids, and another chunk are Aboriginal kids. Each of those population groups make up less than 5% of the population in Calgary. So it's an absurd amount of newcomer youth, particularly, are the children of newcomers that are predominantly in the justice system. And if you talk to each of them, it's the same spiel. I didn't fit in. I was getting bullied. This person came in my life and said, "Hey, you should join us. We'll protect you." All that. It's the same spiel each time. So it's really seeing like how can we work with those parents to see like you saying, "Hey, open the door, go to school." Them come home. So and so missed third period. It's not a courtesy call. You need to follow up with your kids. You need to take an active role with them. Really doing those parenting workshops, building up those parenting skills that are very much fitted to Canada, I think goes a really long way. And then like what's already been said, it's that encouragement piece, whether it's trying to address the financial barrier, helping families apply to jumpstart or kids sport, help even reaching out to sport organizations where if a kid really wants to play on those really high level teams where, you know, it's $1,500 a year, let's work out a payment plan. Let's see if we can cover half. Let's see if we can get them a discount. Let's be advocates for the parents. Um, and then also really seeing like who in the community is showing that interest. So right now at one of our local universities, there's a young man from Ethiopia that's an assistant coach. He played on the team as a student. He really has this passion to teach other young kids basketball. It's like, how can we uplift you? How can we help be a fiscal agent for you to get funding? How can we help you find gym space? And leverage our organization to get you out, to get you there, so that we can uplift those community leaders that are interested but just don't have the skill set or the tools in front of them to really engage those communities. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Noel. And I want to go a step deeper. You mentioned the support in the justice system, particularly around within the Real Me intervention and support. Could you tell us briefly how exactly Center for Newcomers provides that support, and who do you work with?
Yeah, for sure. So right now our program is completely referral based. So about 50% of our kids from the 2 school districts, and the next 50% come from the justice system. So youth probation and the local juvie. So typically, if you think of it as how kids kind of come in contact with us and how we support them, there's kind of a spectrum of what makes you at risk. The low end kids that we work with in terms of risk level can be youth that are, they're skipping school, they're starting to fight with their classmates a lot, they're getting in a lot of fights, they really struggle to communicate with adults, whether that's teachers, whether that's support staff. They're really showing that path that they're getting more and more delinquent behavior, but they're not quite into the space of criminality just yet. Then there's the middle kids, which is a big chunk of what we work with, are the first offense kids that have been charged with assault, theft. There's a charge here in Calgary. It's possession of a prohibited weapon. That's typically bear spray, makeshift knives. Bear spray is really big right now in our high schools. And then the really high end is habitual offenders, kids that are consistently committing crimes. They're consistently in the justice system. They're in and out of juvie. These are kids getting involved in armed robbery, serious level aggravated assault, unlawful confinement, which is a variation of kidnapping, and when you try to threaten somebody or extort someone. These are really high level crimes where you're really seeing that these kids are becoming, that criminality is seen as a method to solve life problems. And when we say criminality, we are talking about kids that say, I'm here and I want this over there, and how could I get there? I could ask for help, I could ask to borrow money, I could get a job and earn the money myself. Or the quickest route is I could steal it, I could take it, somebody else could help me get it. And it's really breaking that attitude that that's the right path to solving your problems. That you need to be relying on those around you to solve your problems in a positive way. So how we work with it is when we get that referral, we'll do that assessment, grade their risk level, identify what are those immediate needs. So if it is an academic thing, about half our youth that come in contact with us have some form of learning disability or have been diagnosed, whether this is ADHD, this is anxiety disorders, dyslexia. Let's get them a one-on-one private tutor. If there's a mental health concern there, we can get them counseling, we can get them anger management training. We opened up counseling to parents during the pandemic too, which revealed a lot about how the generational trauma can be passed on to youth and present in various ways. We do kind of a mentorship, so this can be big brothers, big sisters, really trying to get a positive adult role model from their own community. Ideally, we try to go for university graduates. They can really speak on that experience, speak on whether a lot of them are former athletes or have played sports in their past, and they really speak well onto how that's been part of their journey. Obviously, the pro-social support, really just engaging them in activities. We do a lot of activities our own. We take kids swimming. We'll sign them up for boxing time to time, especially those kids with anger management. They really take to boxing well, whether that's paying for fees to get them into soccer or basketball or any other type of sport like that. Family support easily becoming our biggest piece. And this is really what I'm saying with the newcomer youth. All that dysfunctional newcomer youth, it all starts with the parents, whether it's actual neglect or whether it's they're just so busy and overwhelmed of trying to adjust to life in Canada and learn English and work and housing and everything. They're just so overwhelmed with that focusing on their kids to what they need to be doing, especially if they have a underlying health condition, is just not there. And it's saying, how can we really help with parents apply to income support, apply to rental support, whether it's employment for the parents, mental health support for the parents. And then really that employment and life skills, really trying to get kids to build. And this is another trust builder too, is we have kids come up to say, how do I make a copy of a key? My parents are asking me, how do I file their taxes? My parents are asking me this. My parents are asking that. I'm serving the translator during important meetings. And it's really trying to be those advocates for those youth, especially when it comes to the justice system. encouraging probation in the courts, don't ask the kid to translate for their own trial or their own criminal charges to their parents. One, obviously, you're not going to be honest to your parents, especially if they're saying that you've done a really heinous crime. But two, a lot of the kids we work with came to Canada under the age of 10, sometimes under the age of 5. So their fluency in their parents' mother tongue isn't that strong. And explaining aggravated assault, explaining possession of a prohibited weapon, such as like a replicas of BB guns, is really popular as well, gets lost in translation really easily. And you get situations where there's children's services involvement that was unnecessary, or there's families being broken apart that could have been prevented had there been appropriate resources involved. So for our program, really, we see, we had an opportunity to do a Sports for Life Summit here at the center, and we had 2 young men that were formerly involved in our intervention program.
That's Hassan and Hussein.
Hassan and Hussein, exactly. Hikmatov. They're both competitive Muay Thai fighters. If you ever want to look them up and see how they do, they're twins. Credible young men. Came from Kazakhstan, I believe, or Kyrgyzstan. Came to Canada, same kind of run-of-the-mill story. Really struggled to pick up English, really struggled to fit in, really struggled to find where they felt they belonged and what their identity. And we use this word third culture kids. It's really identifying kids that came to Canada at a young enough age where they're not quite identifying with their parents' culture, but they're not quite identifying with Canadian culture. And they're kind of in this gray area in the middle where they're not really sure what's their identity, what's their base, what's their value system. And that's really when those negative actors are saying, hey, you should take a smoke of this. Hey, let's run in this house real quick. I know no one's there right now. We'll get some money. We can go eat, go play video games or something. Like, you just kind of fall in that trap really easy when you don't really sure where you belong. And these 2 young men, they said they were really into fighting. They're fighting a lot. We got them into boxing. They really fell in love with boxing. And through the boxing gym, somebody introduced them to Muay Thai fighting. And they just loved it. They're identical size, so they just would spar with each other 24/7 at home. They've really fallen in love with it. During the pandemic, their coach really came up for them, built a home gym in his garage, got them to come over every day and train in his garage, and that kept them going. And you can really see in the way they speak on it that they came to the point where their friends said, hey, let's go party, let's get high, let's go get a drink. And their first thought was, I got training in the morning. I don't want to mess up with my training, because they saw that value, that they felt good when they were training. They felt like they're building up their stamina. They're building up their confidence. They're in great shape, and they didn't want to mess that up. And then number one, and the thing that's the most underrated part of that story is they got introduced to a coach that was really invested in them, that had the capability to put hours into them, check in on them. Hey, if you're not doing well in school, you're off the team. If you're not following your goals, you're off the team. If you're not, maintaining your diet. And that just kept them motivated, because somebody really put that value system into them. And then you see it on the back end where they're now behaving, they're getting their life in order, that they're now even seeing, oh, I need to step up for my family. And there's these 2 boys, they take care of their mom, they take care of their younger siblings. They're big time breadwinners in their house. And it's seeing that full circle where they see my value is my family, is my community. They may have come here so that I can be successful, but success doesn't mean university. Success can have many definitions. It's really helping those kids say, if academia is not for you, there's many paths you can pursue in life, but you have to be open enough to meet those mentors, meet those positive actors. And sport just plays a really, really easy path for them, because it's so indirect. It's not really clear that that's the ultimate goal of everything. And then they have a lot of fun while they're doing it.
And I'm happy you brought that example up, because that's a key point when we're talking about overcoming versus dismantling. And Hassan and Hussein are aspiring to be gym owners at some point, and that's incredible. And Noel, all of the pieces that you mentioned beautifully tie into the principles of quality sport. You spoke about confidence, motivation, participation, and which leads to competency, which is by definition is physical literacy. But bringing all of those magnificent points that you made, I see it speaking to partnerships based on trust to support those who are new to this country, who are new to your community in Calgary, and understanding what the challenges are so that we can work together. Again, as you said, it takes a community to build. So thank you very, very much there, Noel, where you touched on overcoming and in some instances, dismantling those barriers. I want to shift now to Kirithika. Kirithika, you spoke around representation, you spoke around providing support and assistance to clothing, gear, transportation, but those are temporary solutions because those barriers and challenges would remain for those who are new. You made mention briefly, and I hope you speak a bit more about it here. How do we gain sustainable funding so that we can put systems in place or dismantle systems so that some of those barriers no longer exist? I'd love to hear a bit more from you, Kirithika.
A lot of the partners we've been working with, we've been fortunate because for us, like as I keep mentioning over again, like the partnerships and collaborations has been very crucial for the success of our programs. When we're like, for example, when we're even looking for like a facility to run a program in, oftentimes, even if we have the fund to, book a facility, it's not available. Like there's a lot of places when we've connected with partners and it was simply, we couldn't run the program because there was no facility available. And so with the partners that already have pre-existing partnerships with facilities, they've actually offered the place free of cost for us, right? So we've been able to then rent the gym, use the facility. So even though we, within our funding, we have funding to rent a facility. Sometimes it's simply, there is no facility to rent. We don't have any. So when they've had an existing partnership with a facility, they've also come forward and they're willing to do things for us. For example, when one of our new programs are running in Penticton, which is a women and girls only program, they're part of the conversation. What are we going to do to make this space safe for these women and daughters to participate? They're going to do things, make sure that during this time, the janitor doesn't enter the facility. No one's going to be able to enter. They're going to provide childcare opportunities because, again, within that facility, there are childcare. There is a childcare center. So how we can work with them. So it's really, we're looking at it from a very like holistic approach, and there's so many different people that are involved just to be able to create this one safe program that we're offering. So like when we're doing a mother and daughter, childcare is one of the biggest barriers, right? For mothers to be able to come out and participate, especially when they have young children. A lot of times for them to bring all of their children to a program and they can participate is a big benefit. So when we're looking just from the first get-go, entering a facility, is there childcare opportunities? Is there glass windows? So a lot of times these are barriers that exist even before we can run our programs, right? So, it's right from the get-go, when we're creating a new center, working with, sport organizations, newcomers, settlement groups, various cultural organizations, what do they need for a center or a grass field or whatever facility that we're using to exist for them to be able to be comfortable in that. And, a lot of times we're going into pre-existing structural like facilities that already exist and there's only certain things that can be done. But this really starts way before, like when there's a new community developed, a city, right from that get-go, involving a number of different partners. And that I found, even when I did my research on South Asian women and their barriers in facility, that wasn't one of the number one things, right? Like we need to bring the various people into the conversation when like a simple thing as a structure is being built. And then we're bringing sports in and what each sport needs, what each organization and group, right? So I think if things before right now we are going into pre-existing, but if we're starting way back, there's a whole other area that we can look at. And I'm sure, a lot of people have like from swimming and different sports that face other barriers in terms of equipment and clothing and things like that, right? So, yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you very much, Kirithika. Let's hear from Craig. Craig, earlier on you made mention around from a policy perspective where Immigrant Partnership Winnipeg in this anti-racism in sport initiative created a sport accord, the anti-racism and sport policy templates. I see this as affirmative action where you support
Nothing
the
new.
community in not only overcoming, but dismantling some of those barriers. So before we go to you, Craig, I ask that we mute our microphones and allow for the panelists or speakers to have the space. So let's hear from you, Craig. How can we transition from overcoming to dismantling some of those barriers that you spoke to?
Oh yeah, thanks again, Kabir. Well, I think for us, our approach has been one of collaboration, and we've spoken a lot about partnerships and collaborating based on trust, but just collaborating even more with community, collaborating even more and having those discussions with the communities that we're working with and the communities that have the need. So bringing others in and not just saying we have all the answers. We have gotten where we have gotten simply because we've had the community working with us. So even when we started designing our policy templates, when we started designing, just creating the accord, everything has been, the community has had their hands in every part of it. The sport community, the newcomer sport committee, newcomer serving organizations, or advisory committee and our partners. So for us, I think those are, or that's the first part. When we talk about dismantling, and it's for us with the work that we do, and when I say us, I'm lumping everyone here in that us. It's not an overnight thing. So when we even talk about overcoming to dismantling, for many of the barriers that we face, they're not things that just at the snap of a finger, they'll be gone. But I believe that with, and for our approach with that collaboration, that persistence in working together, we are ensuring that we're addressing the right things and we're looking at the right areas and we're having those discussions. That's helped us. So even with the accord, again, it's not a here, fix it. It's a here, let's continue to collaborate. Let's continue to see what we can take from what others have done, steps and progress other organizations have made, and see what we can do to build and work together to actually have that change done. And then finally, again, just keeping the conversation going. It's easy for us to want to move ahead or to even sort of get burnt out sometimes. But I think for a lot of the areas that we're touching on, if we really want to break down and dismantle those barriers, it's to ensure that we keep on doing that assessment of our organizations, keep on doing that assessment of our programs, and ensuring that the conversation continues until those barriers are dismantled. We've seen in general, you can pick different areas or spheres where you've started something, then the conversation dies and the movement itself or the good work that we want to achieve stops. And then we go back to square one. So those two things have been big for us, and we continue to encourage it, collaboration and just keeping that conversation going and having that articulation so we can make sure we get to where we want to go.
Thank you, Craig. And we have, lots of thumbs up, heart emojis and comments in the chat box, sort of agreeing with us that, it's really key to build partnerships, courageous partnerships based on trust and understanding. We heard some really good stories, real examples, and learned a lot from each and every one of your programs. So we'd use this opportunity. We have about 15 more minutes where we can engage with the participants of this webinar to hear from you. You now have 15 minutes to ask questions to myself or any of the panelists. There were a few before in the chat box that we were able to address. But over to you, Dean. Do we have any questions that we'd like to address at this point?
Yeah, one question that is here is from David Chang, who works for the city of Markham and the school board, and they have some great programs and activities for children and teens. David mentions, the two major obstacles being, of course, cost, fees, and transportation, but through his own personal experience, culture and language play an extremely important part in preventing newcomers' participation in sports. There's very little that we as coaches and activities leaders can do about it. What are your thoughts, basically, opening it up to the panelists as well as yourself, Kabir?
Thank you, Dean. Really great question. Craig, you want to take that one first? I see you're nodding.
No, I was just nodding. That it's a great question. And again, what I'm learning in a lot of discussions I'm having, we have such great representation here. I think the situation or the space might work differently based on your city or your province. So I think, and I'll definitely let Key and Noah, especially because of the applied work that they've done with this. But yes, it's tough. But again, that's where that discussion takes place. So it might not be removing, for example, funding or removing the total cost of a program so that people can participate, but it's starting to have that discussion and working so that you can know, okay, how can we make a plan for? Maybe it's just removing the entrance fee. Maybe it's just, okay, let's commit to giving a free space for a time frame, and then you get towards your goal later on. But it's that discussion with the community that's being impacted and working with those newcomer serving organizations so that you can identify those barriers. And then you'll be surprised at some of the suggestions that can come from that collaboration. And then what might seem as a difficult barrier to remove based on your space or based on your requirements or your need, you might be able to find solutions as you go and get to that goal later on.
Yes.
But I'll definitely be working in Noah.
Yeah. Great point, Craig. And we have had so many discussion points just in this virtual space on suggestions. I would like to go to cultural intelligence, and that's the understanding to adapt to the various cultures and ethnic groups within the community. And how you build that is, again, starting with trust and understanding. And Kirthika made a really good point in their programs. They actively recruited facilitators, coaches, officials, volunteers from those ethnic and community backgrounds. So there's that first awareness. So we talk about the LTD pathway in the rectangle. There's that first awareness and first involvement piece. But any comments, Kirthika, Noel, around that question?
Yeah, just kind of what Greg has already mentioned, and just what you mentioned, like that awareness, and like when they've come to the program and they're seeing someone that they can relate to and that represents them, you have a natural tendency to like want to do what they tell you to do, and versus when they can't relate to somebody, right? So I think that has been, and there has been so many different barriers with each of the programs, and again, just working with them, and if it's one little thing that we can remove, and then what's like how now are we going to make sure that these programs are sustainable? Like, is it, from Volleyball BC's perspective, like, each year there might be one participant or that, goes into like club volleyball or the existing programs that are already running. We can only run so many newcomer programs. So like kind of our next steps or the sustainability is that transition of providing the opportunities and connecting these participants to the mainstream volleyball programming and leagues and things that we are running on an ongoing basis. And if that means like, we support, let's say, one team from a community to join one of our like adult recreational leagues, and how that brings community and them to learn from other people, because we do run a number of recreational programs throughout the Lower Mainland. But I think like just approaching each one as its own is kind of the key, that like it's not a one size fits all for any of these. There's things that we learn from one, but it's like the next one is we're working with different demographics. We even if we've worked in Penticton with youth, now we're doing mother and daughters, which has it's a complete different program basically altogether, even though it's the same partner, we're working with the same facility to run the program. It's a different program altogether. So it has its own needs, wants, complete separate barriers that we are trying to overcome, dismantle, and again, working with the partner and taking it one step. And once we've done all of these, a number of them, and then seeing what, if there is a trend, if there's something that we can later then, like a toolkit that we can then share with the number of organizations, clubs, that do run this sport. And just coming off of like the role modeling and representation, with the help of Sport for Life and Canadian Women in Sport, we were one of the 3 organizations in partnership with South Van to run like a pilot project, and we specifically worked with newcomer women and girls, and we piloted like a mentorship and beach volleyball program last summer. So again, a huge positive from that was that there was coaches, and we had coaches and referees come and speak about, you know, how they got into the sport, how much the sport has benefited them, and the different career pathways. So even though a child, like I think Noelle or someone was mentioning about, like, you know, parents buying into sport and when they have so many other concerns, when they understand it's, you know, it's not just playing the sport, there are other, like, this can become your job. There's employment opportunities, there's volunteer opportunities. And so that's kind of where we saw when we brought in the coaches and referees and the mentorship component of that, as well as then the physical, you know, part when they went to the beach, and some of them had just never experienced going to Spanish Banks where we ran that program. So forget it was volleyball, that was a sport, but just the experience of being by the water, the mountains, and that Canadian culture that a lot of them, even though they live in BC, they're 40 minutes away, they've never experienced. I think of all the participants we had, only 2 of the girls had ever been to the beach. So, you know, and they've lived here for 2-3 years. So just that experience and the excitement was, you know, something that I think the benefit of the program, like, yeah, we're doing the sport, they're active, they're out there, but it was just so, I think, like, just enriching and just so satisfying for myself, and as well as the coordinator from South Vancouver.
Beautiful. Thank you. Noel, any comments on the question?
Yeah, I'll just keep it short because I think it's been summarized perfectly. I'll just say, yeah, it's the intentionally making space for newcomer youth. Like that's it. That's all we need. And I think this year we're doing a lot of partnerships because a lot of groups have reached out to us and said, we really want to making space for newcomer youth and different ethnicities a priority. We want to diversify what the sport looks like or increase participation from newcomers in general, and reaching out and saying, we're going to make time for just your clients. We're going to make time to just for the clients that you can connect us with. We're going to make that our priority. We're going to make it so that they can come in and just do it themselves and feel comfortable and get used to it. I think that very intentional attitude from our partners is what making the difference. I grew up in Canada. My family came when I was young, and I went to the mountains for the first time probably like in my late teens because my parents were like, that's not for us. Or I, to this day, like I'm trying to learn how to do winter sports and learn how to ice skate, because as a kid it was just, that's not for us. You don't do outdoor stuff in the winter. So I think just breaking that attitude, and like, if whether it's a stereotype and whether it's just that barrier to entry is just that attitude change. I think having that intentional saying, we're going to make ice time for just newcomer families so they can come and fall with each other and figure out, so they don't have to feel embarrassed. And if that's the barrier, great, let's address it. And then partners that want to get us onto the water, we try to take some families like kayaking and stuff last year and really recognize, okay, it's a lot of people's first time on a boat. It's a lot of first time on the water. This year we did indoor sessions, did indoor pool sessions, let them fall in the water, get confident. Okay, the life jacket will save me. And then now this summer we're ready to go out on the water. And I think that's been because it's been intentional. They said we're willing to find funding and do the indoor pool sessions and have coaches there that will just do that to get people comfortable. And then we'll go outdoors. Like that intentional attitude and following through, I think it's so needed, and it has such an immenseful impact.
Fantastic. Thank you. Lots of wisdom being shared here today. We have time for one more question, Dean.
Absolutely, yeah. So Tristan mentioned, you know, all these programs seem to be aimed towards youth and children. Can any of the panelists go on detail about their programs that are aimed solely at adults who may be new to Canada?
You want to take that one, Kirathika?
Yeah, so those would be our next kind of steps. Like we've done these pilots, and I actually oversee the adult programs with Volleyball BC. So just from my personal experience and the influx of new immigrants that have come, there's a lot of newcomers that come to Canada and they reach us and they're like, hey, we played this, we want to get involved. We saw someone hitting a ball at the beach, they're walking. So that is actually our next, like that is somewhere that we're going towards. And because we run a lot of adult recreational programs, and I guess one thing with our adult programs is we do have a fairly diverse representation in the sport. Like depending on where the league runs, sometimes it is all Filipinos in our leagues or all South Asians. So we do have the opportunity. There are people that can champion and kind of advocate for the adult population just from our pre-existing programs. So it is one of the next things that, like as an organization, we do want to look at is with the adults and those that have come. So thanks for that question. Yeah, but that's kind of like the next steps from our side.
Any comments, Craig, from anti-racism in sport perspective when engaging adults or older adults when it comes to sport and physical activity?
Well, when it comes to again, I think Kiritka mentioned it. Well, let's say target the kids, but going through the kids can actually be a good way to actually get to the parents. So it doesn't become okay, your kids need to do this, but let's see how we can bring your parents in so that they can be more aware. And also, as Noel alluded to, go see that this space is for them too.
Beautiful. Thank you, Craig. And Noel spoke quite at length around the power of engaging the parents and the community upliftment and those connections. Anything you'd like to add, Noel?
Yeah, it's I think a lot of funding is very much geared at youth. Youth I know is defined differently everywhere. We go up to 24.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like Kabir said, like parents or youth can be a good avenue to get the youth and parents engaged. And then for young adults, definitely like having those type of programs. I think from the newcomer settlement agency environment here in Calgary, I think that's becoming a more popular topic, is making sports a little bit more accessible, particularly when it comes to young girls, because a lot of families that we work with are coming from countries where girls don't really have that freedom to participate in sports. So that's already one area. And then there's a lot of peer support groups that really target women, and just creating those spaces for women to just also get healthy and be active outside of just day-to-day life.
Beautiful. Thank you very much, Noel. So that we have about 1 more minute. Please do send your questions in the Q&A box. Dean will collect them all. I will work with Kiritika, Craig, and Noel, and we provide some responses to those and email them out. I'm about to drop in the chat box. We are doing a Francophone version of this discussion next week on May 25th. My colleague Kim Sampson would be hosting that session. So please do share with your friends and colleagues so they can attend and enjoy similar wisdom that we've enjoyed today. I'm a bit of a loss of words of how wonderful this conversation went. This 90 minutes flew so fast. So I want to say a heartfelt thank you to Kiritika, to Craig, to Noel. Craig, strength and light to you and your family as you're there in Jamaica. And, heartfelt thank you for meaningful questions and participation from you, the participants in this webinar. Do look out for more of these types of conversations upcoming via our newsletters, emails, or just direct contact. And I thank everyone for joining us today. Be champions to create change via quality sport and physical literacy. And as you would have learned today in summary, it's important to create courageous partnerships based on trust. Thank you, everyone, and have a great day.